السلام عليكم، نتمنى تكونوا بخير. اذا غادي نحفظوا هاد الاسئله هادو. اوكي، how are you and how is he. إذن غادي نبدلوا هاد الكلمات هادو اوكي باش تحفظوا more question. اوكي، بزاف ديال الاسئله. اذا قلنا how are you، you can change you. هاد you ممكن نغيرها، نقول مثلا how are your brothers. اوكي، اذا هذه غادي تبقى، هذه غنخليها وغنقول your brothers. how are your brothers. how are your brothers. how are your sisters. Okay, how are your sisters. how are your brothers. how are your sisters. how are your children. how are your children. how are your friends. Okay, how are your friends. how are your for example teachers. how are your teachers. how are your teachers. إذن how are هي كيف حال إخوتك، كيف حال الأخوات، كيف حال أطفالك، كيف حال أصدقائك، كيف حال أساتذتك. أوكي، how are your teachers. how are your friends. how are your children. how are your sisters. how are your brothers. how are your doctors. Okay. how are your doctors. اوكي، اذا هذه بدلنا غير you. how are you. how are they. how are we. how are brothers. how are sisters. how are children. how are friends. how are teachers. how are doctors. اذا ننتقلوا دابا ل how is he. how is he. اذا هنا كنقول how is he، كيف حاله هو. how is he. إذا نفس الطريقة كنخليه how و is وكنشونجي he. how is she. okay, how is your brother. how is your brother. how is your sister. okay, how is your sister. how is your uncle. how is your uncle. how is your aunt. how is your okay, how is your aunt. okay, your aunt عمتك أو خالتك. how is your uncle. how is your boss or manager. Okay, how is your boss? Or you can say manager. How is, okay, your neighbor? For example, كيف حال جارك مثلا. How is your neighbor? Okay, how is your neighbor? How is your aunt? How is your sister? How is your boss? How is your uncle? How is your doctor? How is your teacher? How is your, okay, then like this. هاد السؤال كتبدلوا فيه بزاف ديال الكلمات باش كتحفظوا more question. اوكي، هذه هي الطريقه باش تستافدوا فيها اكثر. تنساوش لي لايك والبارطاج.